in this movie, this gentleman, his life changes when he puts on his mask. But he gets tired of it after a while. In fact, he can't get the mask off. It becomes him. The mask becomes who he is. And he no longer knows who he is and who the mask is. And they become this blur. We all wear masks. When I was down in California the last few days and hanging out with my daughter and my grandkids, and she homeschools. And the book that the older children are reading in their homeschool is called Wonder. And the first several chapters is all I got to go through, but it's an amazing story of a boy who's so disfigured. His face is so disfigured. I mean, his eyes are kind of in the middle of his face, and one is higher than the other. It's so grotesque that nobody can look at him. And he goes to school for the first time in 5th grade, and how he's bullied and teased and ostracized. It's just a terrible, terrible situation. But Halloween comes, and everybody gets to wear a mask to school. And for the first time, he's able to walk down the halls of the school and hold his head up and go like this. For the first time. That's why we wear masks. Sometimes it's the way to survive. I have a handout here, and I just need some volunteers to get them out. I think there's enough for one for everybody, but just in case, maybe couples could just share one, because it's not necessary to have two anyway. So, I use these handouts in my therapy with groups in my workplace. And, it's interesting. I'll be real honest with you and say that I would rather hang out with some recovering addicts than most people. There's just something real about these when I hang out with these guys at work. Like, they get honest, they get real, they share their stories, no matter how painful, no matter how shaming those stories are. And they're just wonderful people. They just don't know it. That's the problem. They have no idea. And it's my job to help them find themselves and to love themselves for a change. And in almost the last week and a half before the 6-week therapy is up, we do this exercise. They wouldn't be ready for it on the first day. But I have them go down this list, and I have them circle all the masks that they wear in their day-to-day life. You put on a different mask for different situations, for different people. We wear masks. And it's always pretty much the same. The people circle approximately half these masks. Some more, some less. But the average is that people wear about half of these masks in their everyday life, if you're really down, dirty, and honest about yourself. And then, of course, sometimes we question, well, Don, isn't this good? I mean, isn't it good to have maybe a mask of, caretaker? What's wrong with being a caretaker? I'm a caretaker. Is that wrong? Or what about being I'm okay? Isn't it okay to be okay? So today I want to bring out what makes masks masks or not masks, really. Because we put these masks on when we go to job interviews. In fact, our resume is a mask for the most part. I mean, you really put your resume together well, right? And when you go for the job interview, you watch every P and every Q, and you put your best foot forward. I mean, it's really tough. I've been in the last few years, well, even as principal and pastor, I was on hiring committees and stuff, but boy, in the last few years, I was on a committee to hire the executive director of the Bridge Youth and Family Services, a multi-million-dollar organization, and we had to come up with an executive director. It took us 3 days to interview 3 people, 8 hours a day, and we grilled them, and we gave them little surprise jobs, and they had to come up with answers, and We had to see what they were, because a resume is a resume for a sec, because people, it takes a while to find out what people are really like, and maybe sometimes you never really do, and often until you hire them, right? When we date, when we find that one we want to hook up with, don't we put our best foot forward? And then somewhere down the road we go, oops. Yeah, it can happen, right? Some of us wear the mask of I'm okay. I'm always fine, I'm always good, even when I'm not fine and good. Galatians 6:3 says, if anyone thinks they're something when they're not, they deceive themselves. What are you pretending not to know? It's not about deceiving others so much as it is really deceiving yourself. So, imposters, people who wear masks, are preoccupied with acceptance and approval. As human beings, our greatest need is acceptance. It's our greatest need. And our greatest fear, therefore, is rejection. That's why public speaking is one of the top 3 fears of all humankind. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection. I was talking to Ernie today, and I said, I have this stress cough. He says, what are you stressed about? Well, I have to speak today. You don't get stressed, do you? Yeah, I do. I get stressed. The teacher who wrote my speech textbook in college, Dale Carnegie, said he always got nervous before he spoke. We have a fear of rejection. It's born within us. We want to be liked. We want approval. And imposters have a suffocating need to please others. They can't say no with the same confidence that they can say yes, because to give a no, to say no, I can't help you, might mean rejection. It might mean not being liked. So it's difficult. And so people who are people-pleasing, who can't say no, they overextend themselves. They volunteer more than they should. And they finally burn out. I remember, and many of you remember those days where I had to go on stress leave. I was off for it ended up to be most of a year. It was in this period of time in my life when I, for the first time in my life, actually had clinical counseling. Went to a clinical counselor. And I began to understand myself as to why I was burning out. I began to realize what was behind it all. Come back to that later. Imposters can become perfectionists. Boy, if anybody's a perfectionist, that's kind of the story of my life. They have fears of not living up to others' expectations. They can become driven and achievers, and they become addicted to approval. A book that I read after I was taking, my counseling was Joyce Meyer's, Addicted to Approval. Hit me between the eyes. Dr. Gabor Mate, specialist on addictions and things like that. In his book, When Your Body Says No, he says, how many school principals, instead of going to the students who are, smoking grass behind the school and skipping class and getting Fs, instead of sending them to the counselor, how many principals will send the straight A, president of the class, yearbook editor person, you need to see the principal. And Dr. Gabor Mate would say, this person is headed for the same place the other person's headed for. They're just doing it in a different way. And they're just coping with the same stuff, they're just coping in a different way. What are they coping with? Well, in terms of masks, Matthew 6:1 says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. And this is the purpose of masks, to be seen. To be seen. To be seen differently because we're afraid to be seen the way we feel we are on the inside. How do we become imposters? How do we become imposters? And I've read many, many books on this, and they all say the same thing, and I've seen it in myself, and I've seen it in others. A false self is born. A mask. A false self is born when, as children, we're not loved well, or when we're outright abandoned or abused or rejected. We develop a false self. John Bradshaw, author of this, refers to this as codependency, which is characterized, codependency is characterized by a loss of identity, and so you find that you have to hook up with somebody to have that identity. And this partner becomes who you are, connected at the hip. We try to become someone we think others will like and accept. That's what it's all about. We try to become people that we think others will like and accept. So our greatest need as children is to be accepted by our parents. And so here's what happens in childhood. Children figure out what it takes to get their parents' approval. That's what they do. And so some become the jokers, the comical people. They figure, I get mom and dad to laugh, and they become the joker, the class clown. Some become the performers, and they excel in performing, whether it's piano or whatever. Some become very quiet and submissive doormats, because that's the way to keep mom and dad off your case. Some become overachievers, straight A's. That's the way to get approval. Some become caretakers. They will take care of the family members. They'll even take care of their own parents when they're alcoholics or whatever the deal is. And they become these caretakers that will never take care of themselves, but will take care of the whole world first and die as a result on the inside. This is how we develop these masks. Early in childhood. So to the imposter, it's about acting certain ways because it gives the imposter a sense of who they are, a good sense of who they are. They feel good about themselves when they do these certain things. I must be a good person. Everybody laughs. And what's wrong with cracking a joke? Nothing. Martin told one today, we just had a belly laugh. It was amazing. I love that joke. I got to tell you Martin's joke. It was a T-shirt, and it said, "If war is the answer, the question must be flippin' stupid." Anyway, I got to get that T-shirt. But the problem is, the person who wears this mask will laugh inappropriately at inappropriate times. When the conversation starts to get deep and close to home and vulnerable, they crack a joke because they don't want to go there. They don't want to feel the pain. They don't want to feel the sadness. They don't want to feel that fear. So they crack a joke to relieve. It's like comic relief. And so they never get real. They never allow themselves to be vulnerable and empathetic and compassionate. They just crack a joke to avoid the pain. That's what it's about. And so people become performers in ministry, performers at work, homemaking, or they make money to buy clothes and cars so that they look good on the outside, so that people will accept them and like them. They must be great people. Because deep down, they have these beliefs that I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm unimportant, I'm not rich enough, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. And so they have to compensate for those feelings that they believe about themselves by putting on a front. How sad. The mask becomes very heavy after a while. Very heavy. Just like in the movie. So imposters live by a shame-based lifestyle. It's all shame-based. They're trying to avoid the feelings of shame, not feeling good enough. Not feeling good enough. Shame is it's like guilt, but it's false guilt. Guilt is, I did something stupid. Shame is, I am stupid. Big difference. A big difference. A person who believes that, really feels that she is intelligent, can do a stupid thing and not feel stupid. They can just say, well, that was a stupid thing to do, but I'm still a good person. I'm still intelligent, even though I did a stupid thing. It doesn't bring them down. It doesn't put them in the depths of rejection and shame. Imposters become blind to their own emptiness. Their own emptiness. It's about, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago I was at Trinity Baptist. They had they call it a Levite Summit at Trinity Baptist Church a couple weeks ago. It was several days long, and it culminated on Saturday evening, which I found very interesting. There was a big emphasis on Sabbath rest in that summit. Churches from all over Kelowna were involved. Sabbath rest. And they had several books on Sabbath. I bought one. It sounded like it was written by an Adventist. But in the sermon, I thought it was one of the best sermons on relationship with God that I'd heard forever. But one little nugget from that sermon, never forget. The pastor said something like this, that as children, we have these cravings. It's an insatiable appetite for affirmation. We just sort of grow into it. And addiction is kind of like that. It's really that continually wanting to fill that empty space, trying to fill the space. And he says there are misplaced cravings. Like, for instance, when we crave sugar, we think it's sugar, but really it is protein. And when we crave chocolate, what we're really craving is magnesium. And you can go down the list. There's these kind of misplaced cravings that we have. And then he said there are misplaced spiritual cravings. Like when you're home alone and you just feel like, I got to eat. So you start eating. Whatever you see in the cupboard, snacks, you start eating. Or you just have this, you just go on a Netflix binge. You just Netflix, or you're just continually checking your Facebook, He says all of these are really misplaced cravings. What you're really craving is a relationship with God. That's the only thing that will actually fill that hole, that space, that emptiness. So in addition to finding our identity by what we do, imposters also draw their identity from interpersonal relationships. They're name droppers. Name droppers. Wow, I just spent a weekend with the Prime Minister, even though the topic was baseball or something. Okay. Well, what about this? These people tend to prefer to hang out with certain people and avoid hanging out with other people because you don't want to hang out with those people. What will people think? What will people think if I hang out with those people? They need to continually get affirmations from their partners in order to feel good about themselves. And so that's the codependency part, where they draw their identity from their partner. Now they expect their partner to continually tell them, you're so good, you're so good, you're so good. And without that, they go, oh. 2 Corinthians 5:16 in the Message, it says, we don't evaluate people by what they have or how they look. We looked at the Messiah that way and we got it all wrong. Just not what happened. Intimacy. Imposters lack the ability to experience intimacy. Why? Because they fear that people, if they get to know them on a deeper level, they'll reject them. So they can't let people know what their sins are. They can't let people know what their weaknesses are. They can't talk about that. They have to pretend because they might get rejected. And it's really ironic because what they desperately want is the opposite. What they desperately want is people to like them, but they have to do everything to keep them from disliking them by being somebody they're not really on the inside. Imposters, they settle for a diminished life. Why? Because they've been so deeply hurt by someone that they want to keep people away at a distance because they don't want to go through that hurt again. I loved one time and I got betrayed and I got slapped down, so I am not going to risk that again. And this is a little description of what I call codependency. I need you, but don't come close. But I need you, but don't come close. They never experience into me see. They never get there. So they play safe, they play small, they don't take any risks. Their life is quite diminished. Brene Brown, and if you've ever seen this YouTube, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen the YouTube, it's one of the, I think that's still the top 10 YouTubes of all time. Brene Brown, The Power of Vulnerability. She says there's two kind of ends of a continuum. And then, of course, all of us fall kind of from one extreme to the other, somewhere between. But on one extreme, we have the people who, when they walk into a room of strangers or people of any sort, they feel like outcasts. They feel outsiders. They feel like they don't fit in. They're really shy. They shut down, sit in a corner. They hope nobody talks to them, you know. And then on the other extreme, we have people that can walk into any social situation and feel like at home, they belong there, and they can talk to people, and they have this ability to just schmooze and everything. And she says she's done all this research to figure out what makes the difference between these two groups of people, and it boiled down to one single thing. The people who believe they fit in and believe that they are in and feeling, comfortable with people, it's because they believe they are worthy of fitting in. And the people who are very uncomfortable with mixing with people and they're shy and they believe they're not worthy of fitting in. They believe they're worthy. Simple as that. And it makes a huge difference. Imposters don't believe these words. They can't believe them. So they have to wear a mask to become someone that they're not in order to feel worthy, to feel like they fit in, to feel they are enough. That's why we wear them. Imposters are driven by the fear of rejection. They're afraid to let others know how they're truly feeling because they might get rejected. They're afraid of being assertive, so they're either passive and will avoid all conflict, and then they'll think, well, I must be God's child because I'm a peacekeeper. Or they become overly aggressive to compensate, to fit in. What's the price they're paying? This is one of my imposters off the sheet. I got a few more, but this is one of mine. It was in my counseling, in that period of time in my life when I really did some work on myself, that I discovered this. You see, up to that time, my wife would say, Don, you're always right, and I hate it. Why do you always have to be right? And I would say, I don't know what you're talking about. If I'm right, I'm right. A good friend of mine said, Don, people think that you're so defensive. What are you talking about? You're so defensive. What does that mean? Well, you're always right. Well, if you're right, if I'm right, well, what's wrong with being right? Unconsciously, I had no idea what was going on. But I realized that unconsciously, and now it's become conscious, and now I've been able to do something about it, being right, to me, meant that I was good enough. And to be wrong brought shame. It brought shame, a feeling of shame, a deep feeling of not being good enough, not being worthy. And there's nothing worse than feeling shameful. It's like being naked in the mall. Seriously. Shame is a powerful emotion, and it drives so much of our behaviors. Call it embarrassment, call it whatever you want. It's still just shame, and it's icky. And so I had to be right to feel good enough to get rid of the shame. Like I said, I wasn't consciously going, I have to be right because I feel shame. But then I began to realize what was driving this, and it was driving my insatiable need to keep going and keep doing and all of that stuff. And I realized it's because I was trying to feel good enough, but I could never do enough to feel good enough. It's going to be an endless, hopeless journey, a bottomless pit that I'm trying to fill. So take a break, Don, take some rest, and know you're good enough, whether you're right or wrong. That's what I had to keep telling myself. So I had to switch my words. I had to switch my words because of my shame. I had to go, if my wife said this, I'd say, honey, I might be wrong, but here's what I think. Comes across a lot better than, no, that's not right, it's this way. And that's how it was. That's not right, it's like this. But how about, you know what, I might be wrong, here's what I think. Because now inside, I knew that whether I was right or wrong, I was still the same person, good enough. I don't have to be right to be good enough. And you've heard the phrase, would you rather be right or have a relationship? Imposters dread being alone. When you're alone and the music's turned down, you start to hear your own thoughts, and your own thoughts are telling you stuff like, you're nobody, you're not good enough, and people are going to find that out, and you don't want to hear those voices. So you avoid being alone, and you avoid peace and quiet. And worst of all, imposters lack true intimacy with God because they refuse to be their true selves with God. They refuse to admit their imperfections to God. But whatever's denied cannot be healed. Awareness is the beginning of healing. The imposter is antsy in prayer. The imposter is antsy in prayer because there's a greater hunger for excitement. The imposter continually craves mood-altering experiences. They need that high to feel okay and to dull the voices, to quiet the voices. Accepting the reality of our sinfulness means accepting our authentic self. Accepting the reality of our sinfulness means accepting our authentic self. Now, I want to say something here, because I am a sinner is an action word, like I am a swimmer. I'm a walker. I'm a runner. I'm a cycler. It's an action word because it means I do sin. I make sins. And lots of times we take I am a sinner to be our identity, and that's dangerous. Because our identity is not what we do, it's who we are. And this is the problem of the masks. We think that what we do becomes who we are, when no, we're not defined by that. At work, we play this game. It's a game. I call it a game. It's kind of fun, but we get the group of people, and there's usually 20, 22 people, and we make them wear a label. Carpenter, nurse, drug dealer, prime minister, alcoholic, garbage collector, doctor, lawyer, teacher, secretary. And we say, okay, now order yourselves in importance. Arrange yourself in this room by the order of your importance. And then we stand back and watch them. And it's quite chaotic. And then they start putting people, prime minister over here, garbage collector over here. No, garbage collectors are sort of important. Put them over here. Drug dealer down here. And then someone clues in. The prime minister could be an alcoholic. And has society told us who's more important than anybody else? And 90% of the time they don't get it. We have to say, hold on, folks, let's make a circle, hold hands. Now, who's more important in this circle? We're all important. Everybody's important. Nobody's more important than anybody else, and nobody's less important than anybody else. But we carry around this idea that, well, I'm not as important as that person. You follow me? So I better act important to fit in. Masks. Judas could not face his true self. Peter couldn't in the moment either. Jesus, I don't even know the guy. But Peter, unlike Judas, came to recognize his imposter, and he repented and changed. It's a paradox. I can't remember who the quote comes from. In fact, I think it's unknown now I think about it. I just use it so much at work, I just quote it without thinking who said it. But it's a paradox that until we accept ourselves just as we are, we cannot change. Doesn't that seem paradoxical? Until we accept ourselves just as we are, we cannot change. Here's who I am. Here's what, warts and all, this is who I am. Now I can change. But if I have to, no, I can't, I'm not that person. I have to be this person. The greatest question on earth is, who am I? And we cannot answer that by any exterior things. Well, I have this much money. I drive this car. I wear these clothes. I'm married to this person. This person's my dad. These are all external things. Who we are is on the inside. And the truth of the matter is, I'm worthy and I'm valuable. I am worthy and I'm valuable. This supersedes all the lies like I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, I'm not thin enough, I'm not, you fill in the blanks. How do I know this? Because of the cross. Like the price that was paid for my redemption is beyond measure, so therefore I'm that valuable. I'm a child of God. If you're going to drop a name, drop this one. I'm a child of God. This is the only thing that counts. Right? The song. You know, who am I? I'm loved by you. That's the only thing that counts. Let me tell you something. I think you can get this. My kids and my grandkids are worthy and valuable, period. I don't care if they go to university or flunk kindergarten. I don't care. They're just as worthy and just as valuable as anything. There's no limit to the value of one of my kids or my grandkids. Now, your kids, on the other hand, you know, these are my kids. But you, what I'm saying? I am God's kid. He's my heavenly Father. That makes me, in His eyes, worthy and valuable. I'm a child of God. This statement blew me away when I saw it on a song that I want to have you watch right now. You'll see it at the end of the song, and it totally made sense once I caught on to this. And I guess you could say, most of my sermons are inspired by a song. This is a song that inspired this idea today.